Se filma.
Sin miedo al miedo.
A ver, buenas, bienvenidos a este vídeo de unplandivino.net, por así decir, y vamos a seguir con el taller del miedo con Clau y Ana Pilar. ¿Qué tal, Ana Pilar, con tu brazo por ahí?
Hola, con dolor en el brazo, pero bueno, hay que pasarlo.
¿Qué había que no dabas tu brazo a torcer? Ese dicho se dice también en Argentina. Sí. Y Claudia, ¿qué tal con tus dos brazos vivos?
Sí, acá no es por los brazos, viene por otro lado, la columna. Me vino muy bien el tema de las flatulencias ayer, que me olvidé de contarle a Ana, que no sabía y desconocía la conexión que tenía con esas emociones. Acá también andamos igual, a los pedos diríamos en Argentina.
Bueno, pues ahí, a respirar mucho ahí a la barriga con la intención de conectar con las emociones verdaderas, así nos vamos mentalizando por lo menos. Y aunque no sea... Bueno, luego lo hablamos todo. Vamos a seguir con el lío.
Dale.
Vamos allá.
I'm still feeling a lot of...
Esto empieza así, pumba, directamente, porque lo está recortado los vídeos de esta parte así, de esta manera. Y así empieza.
A lot of spirits emotions about this discussion about fear and how much of a large influence they're having. So during the afternoon we may get a chance to talk to some of these spirits, and hopefully those of you don't mind watching on that discussion if we get the opportunity. And then what we'll be able to do hopefully is feel a bit more positive about dealing with our fears rather than feeling so negative about them. Could someone handle the roving microphone? One's already on this side, so I need someone on this side. Thanks, Lee. Awesome. It's on. Is there any questions, firstly, that you'd like to ask about what we've presented so far?
Hi, AJ.
How are you?
You were talking about the fears coming up in our body, and I saw you last weekend, and you said you were going to talk about fears, and does it come up physically as well? Because I got the next day I had this covered in heat rash.
Yep.
All over my face and my neck.
Yep.
And then I laid in bed and I thought, I can process this, whatever.
Yep.
And then the next 2 days, or the day and a half after that, I got absolutely bitten alive on the legs.
Yeah.
With extreme pain, and I couldn't sleep last. Would that be the same?
Well, rashes and bites are the result generally of suppressed anger rather than suppressed fear. But remember from our discussion, we can see that the anger is suppressing the fear, which is suppressing the grief. So the key is to look at what you're feeling in terms of your anger-based emotions.
Vamos a ver que hay un señor airado por ahí. Voy a cerrar la ventana. Que quiere proyectar la ira. Y yo lo voy a proyectar.
Más todos los espíritus. Más los espíritus, ahora que empezó hablando de espíritus y ya se enojaron, ¿eh?
Sí, sí, están ahí clarísimos.
¿Cómo?
Bueno, vamos.
And then look underneath the anger-based emotions into the fear. And both of you have actually had, in the last week, quite a few fear-based reactions, which has been really good for you, actually.
Yeah.
So the key is to allow those to continue. Yeah. When you bodily experience your fear, you may even do things like vomit and all sorts of things, right?
Yeah.
So it gets pretty intense sometimes dealing with fear. And the key is to be prepared for that. So it's no good having a nice carpeted area in your home with no bucket there if you're going to deal with fear, right? Because you will need your bucket at some point, I can guarantee you. And so in my case, I've found...
Seguramente no lo llamáis cubo en Argentina, pero bueno, luego lo comentáis. Un recipiente, ¿no? Grande para vomitar. Bien.
I've gone through sort of feelings of... Often if I've had a huge amount of fear, what will happen is I'll have this feeling these feelings building up of blocked feelings. I'm blocked, and many of you have that feeling, I'm blocked. And then all of a sudden I'll have this breakthrough into the fear. And in one case I was really blocked up about emotions about women and how damaging my relationships in the first century with one woman. It wasn't really a relationship, it was just a friendship, but how that friendship was damaging to me quite a lot. And then once I worked my way, in terms of working my way through the fear, I finished up vomiting for 2 days before I actually got into the underlying grief. So that's how much resistance I had to the fear itself. And I can feel the emotions I'm dealing with now, it's probably going to end up in the same little process as well. So the key is just to allow these processes to occur in yourself. And often we have a lot of mechanisms to suppress, and once we start getting through them, we really feel these deep agitations and feelings inside of us, and then there's an interaction that occurs with us bodily, and often we do need to express those things physically as well, and our body will react. So I've had very few releases of fear where my body hasn't reacted. So we need to be very, very conscious that our body is probably going to react when we start dealing with our fear-based experiences. Now, for many of you, there's a fear in that, isn't there? Like being afraid of what the fear is going to do when you experience it. And this gets back to that one of those beliefs that I wrote up on the board, that I cannot cope with that. Many of us have this belief that I cannot cope with that. The truth is you can cope with this. You can cope with your emotional processing work. You can cope with any experience. You will be able to do it. And part of that, though, is to feel, the way to get to that point is to actually feel the opposite emotion, which is, I'm never going to be able to do this. You know, go into the fear that I'm not going to be able to cope. Actually feel the fear of not coping, and feel the fear that you're going to be overwhelmed and you don't know what you're going to do about that.
Se oyen ruiditos por ahí. ¿Veis la pantalla bien y todo?
Ah, yo me olvidé de cerrar el micrófono. Estaba buscando mi virome. Ahí está.
Vale.
Quería anotar eso. Ahí está.
Muy bien, bueno.
Mi cartuchero.
Si queremos también incluso parar para anotar algo y luego comentar también, como siempre. Vale, todos bien.
Now, tomorrow you're going to have to be quite brave to face some of the... if I get the chance to show you some video snippets, you're going to need to be quite brave to look at some of them, because some of them are quite confronting. And so my suggestion is, if you're still a bit worried about dealing with your fears and you're not sure whether you want to go ahead with that, then my suggestion is you might want to avoid tomorrow. Not that I'm recommending you avoid your fears, but come tomorrow prepared, if you like, to get to connect with some of these fears. Now, just to give you a bit of a rundown about tomorrow, tomorrow we'll be connecting with fears about a whole set of different issues, ranging from fears about world change events right the way through to war and other emotions like that. Also, right the way through into religious fears as well, which many of you had from your childhood that have been impressed upon you and not released. So if you can allow these things to occur and allow these fears to be triggered, and what I'll try to do tomorrow is give you as much ammunition as possible to actually face a lot of those fears. I can't bring a bucket for you. You have to bring your own buckets if you're worried about your buckets. And the issues with regard to often bodily reactions is we're so afraid of body reactions. We're often so concerned and afraid for them. And so the thing is to start allowing yourself to have your body reactions. Start allowing yourself to feel what your body feels. And that's a very, very important part of the process. Okay. Well, my person who was going to channel for me, I've triggered her fears. No. And so she's off dealing with some of her fears about doing channeling in public. So we won't be able to deal with that just yet until she returns, and maybe then we won't be able to yet either. So what I'm trying to do now with all of my personal interactions with people is when I notice people have different fears and they're really willing to deal with them, I'm then triggering them quite frequently by asking them to do things that they might not normally do or things like that. Not things that are out of harmony with love, but just to trigger the fears that are within them. And if a person's in the fear place, they'll actually go and deal with that fear first and then come out of that, and then we can work together quite easily. So that happens quite a lot around me. And you'll find that a lot of these sessions are pretty ad hoc in the sense that I haven't organised them very much at all, and that's the reason why. So what we'll do while we're waiting for my friend Monica to deal with those fears that she has is to start looking at some daily practical things, some more daily practical things you can do about your fear. So let's look at sort of like a daily practice, if you like. If you're in a state of fear and you know it, what things can you do day by day to help address your fear? Now, many of you know from other discussions that there's really a couple of things happening with regard to fear. If we call this one the fear scale and this one the pain scale, so pain is up there and fear is up there. The opposite of pain is obviously pleasure, okay? So put pleasure down on this end of the scale. And the opposite of fear is actually, oh yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I don't think love has an opposite, but truth certainly does. Remember, if fear is false expectations appearing real, then what is the opposite to what is false? What is true? Yep. So obviously, when you're in a state of truth, you're also in a state of love. So that's a part and parcel of that. But let's have a look at what happens. Here might be the level of pain we have, and here might be the level of fear we have. Now, if that's the case, you will not deal with any of your pain. If your fear is greater or about your pain, then you won't deal with your pain. So we've got to get at some point to this stage where we're no longer afraid of the pain. Does that make sense? We're going to have some emotional pain. You've already got physical pain, but see, with physical pain, you know what we do most of the time? What we do firstly is we pop a few pills, you know, like headache tablets or body aches or whatever. That doesn't work a lot of times because it happens again and again and again. So what we do then is often the pain gets worse, and by now we're looking at operations. Right? And we even deal with that, don't we? We even totally contemplate going in to have an operation to deal with something that's now degenerated in our body to the state where it's diseased. Why do we do that? Because we still accept the pain more than we do the fear about dealing with the emotion. That's why we do that, you see. So what we need to do is somehow lessen this fear. And so we need some daily practice, something that we can do in a day that helps us reduce the level of fear. Because what we want to do is we want to get the fear down below our pain level, if you like, below our threshold, so that we will always deal with our pain. And eventually you can see that there's two processes involved here. One is a willingness to experience all of my pain, and the other is the willingness to start accepting emotionally truth. So what can we do daily practice-wise that can address both of those issues? That's really what we want to look at. How do we start addressing the truth issue, and how do we start addressing the pain issue? All right, so you've already seen a few of those things that you can do. Remember, just before we were doing some diaphragmatic breathing. You're breathing into this area of your body. All right? So you're feeling into that area of your body. That is allowing yourself to, if you can do that as a daily practice. Now, most of you work or you've got, you do things around home, or it's not easy for you to just lay down and do that. My suggestion is to practice doing that 5 minutes a day, no matter where you are at that particular moment. You might be at work, or you might be out partying, or you might be home, you might be, doing some housework around the house, you might be out gardening, you might be doing all these different things. Just remember, do some breathing. And really start breathing into your diaphragm. So breathing, breathe properly. Breath, breathe. And the next thing is to start allowing yourself to feel the body's sensations. So practice feeling your body, right? So feel your body. Be in your body. You need to stay contacted with your body. What we're doing a lot of times is trying to get out of our body because our body feels painful, so we get out of our body. When you take a headache tablet, for example, you're trying to get out of your body. You're trying to avoid why you've got the headache. Does that make sense? Allow yourself instead, even if you do it for 5 minutes before you take the headache tablet, even if you just do that, that's better. But what you do is you lay down or whatever, or sit down, and just allow yourself to feel that pounding feeling going on. And allow yourself and you can even just ask yourself, what's this pounding feeling all about, But you just allow yourself to feel it. Allow yourself to feel it longer each day. If you have it, right? Allow yourself to feel it. It's pounding again today. What's going on? Allow yourself to feel. Allow yourself to feel. What will happen eventually is you'll break through into actually connecting with the underlying causal emotion if you allow that to occur. So I often feel in pain still. And right today, I've got terrible pain in my stomach today, really bad pain in my stomach. And it's so painful for me today that I'm finding it hard to stay up here and talk. That's how painful it is. But I'm just breathing, allowing myself to feel. I know what it's about. I'm allowed to feel this. I'm allowed to feel this underlying, this deep emotional grief about my own worthiness. And I need to allow myself to feel that, allow myself to feel that, allow myself to stay connected with this pain. If I stay connected with this pain, I'm going to eventually get to the underlying emotion. If I get out of this pain by using a technique, and some of the techniques are if I eat, or if I go off and do something else, or if I go out and party, or if I go, while I've got this pain, I'm actually avoiding this pain now. So I need to reconnect with this pain, reconnect with my body, don't try to get away from it. Now, sometimes when you do that, it feels unbearable. Many of you have felt that, have you? Where you started connecting to the pain and it just feels unbearable, right? And so what we need to do is when that happens, allow ourselves to stay connected with that pain and just cry about how unbearable it is. Just allow those tears to flow about how unbearable it is. Does that make sense? And can we maybe whack on an air conditioner because it's a bit warmish in here now. I'll show you.
Ahora está hablando del aire acondicionado alguna cosa y ya. Sí.
All right, so feel your body. What's next? What do we do next? Whatever emotions come up from that, we want to try to get into the emotion when it's happening. You see, most of the time what we're doing in our daily life is we're going along in our daily life, an emotion gets triggered and we say, I'll put that off to 5 o'clock tonight when I'm away from work, or do you know what I mean? We're automatically trying to shift it to another time. The problem with that is that we're actually adding another layer on top of the emotion of avoidance, right? We need to allow ourselves to shift our emotions as they occur. Now, if an emotion is occurring, let it occur. Now, in the world that we live in today, this is a very difficult thing to practice, isn't it? Because you're going to get lots of judgment about that, you know. And if you're a woman, you'll get a different type of judgment than if you're a man, right? Because a lot of times a woman is allowed to do that in certain circumstances, whereas the man's not allowed to do that at all, oftentimes. So there's lots of different judgments that you'll get if you're a male and a female about those particular things going into your emotions. So allow the emotion immediately. And that is so hard to practice. So start practicing it with little things, right? If you can do that with little things, you'll be able to grow, and it will start growing inside of you where you'll be able to do that with all of your emotions. Now, of course, we're already drinking water, so that's part of our daily practice, and we're already eating so that we're not avoiding our emotions. That's another part of our daily practice. We discussed those before the break. Right? But there's a major daily practice that we need to do, and that is probably the most important one, I feel. And what's prayer? Prayer isn't this religious thing, all right, that most people talk about. What it is a longing directed towards your Creator to assist you with whatever it is that you need assistance with. So what do we need assistance with? We need assistance to get into our fear-based emotions. That's what we need assistance with, right? So what we need to do is actually start longing to God about dealing with these emotions. But we have to be longing in a state of purity, right? It has to be a pure emotion. So if my pure emotion is, I would like to avoid my fear for the rest of my life, that's my emotion. I need to talk about that emotion with God. Does that make sense? So instead of saying to God, please help me to feel my fear-based emotions, what I need to be doing instead is saying to God, I want to avoid all of my fear-based emotions.
Give me all my fear.
Need a microphone if you're going to speak.
Lo ha intentado sin micrófono, así espontáneamente, y ahora con micrófono.
Maybe my prayer would be, give me all my fear.
Yeah, but see, if I don't want all my fear, then that's not a prayer that's pure. You see that?
No, I actually don't.
No. And that's the one thing most people don't realise about their connection with God. You can't connect with God with an impure emotion. When I say an impure emotion, it has to be sincere. If your desire is to avoid your fear, then you need to say to God, I want to avoid my fear. You help me avoid all my fears. You know, why don't you help me avoid all my fears? Get angry with God if you want to get angry. Why don't you help me, like I didn't create my fears. Other people created my fears. Why do I have to now feel my fears? So you allow yourself to actually connect with that emotionally. You see what I'm saying? Your avoidance, not the actual. See, a lot of times what we're trying to do is we're trying to connect to an emotion that we have no real desire to connect to at all. Right? How many of you really want to feel your fear? Really? Like, let's be honest. Like, there's not many of us in the audience who really want to feel their fear. Right? The truth is, if you really wanted to feel your fear, what would already be happening? I'd be feeling my fear. Right? Okay. So if I'm not already feeling my fear, then I don't want to. Right? So we can talk about this of fear all day and wanting to feel your fear, but if you really don't want to feel your fear, what's the best thing to do? To actually pray to God as a pure prayer. I don't want to feel my fear. Let yourself feel some of the anger that you have about that. Right? What do you feel about that? Like, other people have created all your fear. It wasn't you who created it all. It all seemed to be just a part of you by the time you were 5, didn't it? Like, how many of you felt like you went out purposefully to create these fears inside of you? Like, nobody, right? So you don't feel like it's your responsibility to feel these fears. A lot of times what we feel instead is, no, my mum should feel that fear, and my dad should feel that fear, and that little boy bully at school that beat me up every day should feel that fear. And do you know what I mean? We have all of these feelings in us that it's not my responsibility to feel this fear. It's everyone else's responsibility. They're the ones who created it. And then we think, what about God? God created this terrible system where I've got to feel my fear after they created it? That's not fair. I don't think you're fair, actually. Right? This isn't a fair thing to do. What should happen is all of my fear that I have to feel, someone else should have to feel it, you know? And we start connecting with the real emotion we're feeling. Does that make sense? That's a prayer. Do you get the difference between what we're often doing and what we need to do when it comes to prayer? Two opposite things, you see. Now, when I'm starting to do that, I'm now starting to get, firstly, to this anger I feel about the fear that's within me and how unjust it is to feel it and all these other things. And now what I'm doing is I'm releasing my blockages about feeling my fear because I'm experiencing them. I'm feeling the reasons why I don't want to feel my fear. Once I start connecting those, you'll see it happen very rapidly in you. You can connect that within 2 minutes later, you'll be in some fear a lot of times because you've released the blockage to feeling the fear. And this also applies to your underlying emotions with fear. When you feel your fear and start experiencing it, a lot of times you'll get very rapidly to the emotion underneath that. Because it's when we state the truth of how we feel to God that we start connecting to ourselves emotionally. Not when we create a fictitious intellectual viewpoint inside of ourselves. It's very important to understand this, right? When I'm just saying to God, please help me feel my fear, when my emotion is, don't let me feel any fear, then I'm setting up like a lie, aren't I? I'm lying. I'm saying, please help me feel my fear. And God's going, what? You don't want to feel your fear. Like, you want to avoid all your fear. I'm not going to help you feel your fear. Like, your free will saying to me, I want to avoid my fear. You see? How can God answer that prayer? To answer that prayer would be breaking free will. So I can be there saying, oh, please, please, God, help me do this, help me that, and really be feeling totally the opposite emotion. And remember, it's the emotion I'm feeling that God is hearing. It's the emotion I'm feeling that God is hearing, not the words I'm saying. All right? Now, that's very important to understand. We have I know someone's just writing down there, so we'll just, sorry, this might go there. I know you're writing down.
When we actually are feeling our fears, are they connected to a memory that we don't remember now, but at the time we're feeling the fear, the memory comes back?
Oftentimes that will happen. As soon as you actually connect with the emotion itself, whatever the emotion is, most of the time the memories return. So you don't even have to worry about the memories really at this point. All you need to do is allow yourself to connect with the emotion that you feel, right? So if my emotion I feel is a lot of anger and upset with God, like you've learned, many of you have been coming now for some time and learned about all these different ones of God's laws, right? There's this law of attraction thing. Well, how good's that? Like that? You're basically saying with the law of attraction that when I feel, if I don't feel one of the emotions that somebody else created in me, let's face it, most of the time somebody else created in me, basically what I'm telling you is that somebody else created this emotion in you and you're now responsible to feel it. And the law of attraction is going to bring you events to trigger that emotion until you feel it. How fair does that feel to you? Like for most people in the audience, I can guarantee you, once you really ponder about that, you'll feel that's not very fair. Right? You feel that really, no, hang on a sec. Why doesn't my mum's law of attraction bring that emotion to? She's the one who created this one in me. Like, why doesn't she feel it? You see what I'm saying? And so we often have these feelings towards God about that. And so talk to God honestly. And that doesn't mean just talking sometimes. Sometimes you're going to get quite angry and frustrated with God. You're going to be angry and frustrated with this particular law or that particular principle. And you're going to be so upset about injustice. Because remember, I've said in many occasions that love isn't justice. And you're going to be so upset about that. What? You know, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. That's what you want in the end. You know, I want the persons who created this to pay for what what's within me now. And all of those kind of things. So allow the underlying fears to be present. When you start allowing the emotions, sure, the memories will return. But you don't need to worry about that at all. What all you need to worry about is just letting the feeling be present. When the feeling's present, that unlocks everything else.
So when you're praying to God falsely that you really want to feel these fears.
Yeah. And you don't really.
But no, and you don't really. But you're not aware of feeling any fear about not wanting to feel the fears, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, let's look at it. Let's look at what often we do with grief or all the emotions I've mentioned. Many of us are saying, please to God to help me get to my causal emotion. We know that if we release causal emotion, our law of attraction changes, right? We're going to be happier. So most of us feel like, I really would like to connect with some of this causal emotion. So we try to connect with the causal emotion. But we don't really want to connect with the causal emotion most of the time. Because if we really wanted to, we already would be doing it right now, right? This is something we need to remember as a very basic thing. If I'm not right now connecting with the causal emotion, then I don't want to. And I need to be honest and say, I don't want to. I don't want to connect with this causal. You know, the times that I've said I don't want to, sometimes within 2 minutes I've been feeling the causal emotion. It's amazing what it does. It's some kind of psychological thing, and I still don't really get it, really. But basically what it feels like is you're allowing yourself to feel that you don't want to do something, and that's more allowing than it is when you're trying to say I want to when you don't really. And to be frank with you, what's actually going on inside of you is it's the truth that will open you up. And I'm not just saying God's truth will open you up. What I'm saying is when you're truthful with God, it will open you up, right? You try it even in your family. When you're truthful with your family, that's when emotions start coming out, right? It's when you're all trying to cover it over and make out and like no emotions come out then, right? But as soon as you're truthful with a family member, what happens? Oh, you start connecting with your sadness about that particular thing that you're talking about or your anger about it and so forth because you're being truthful, because you're in a dialogue. So what I'm suggesting is have this dialogue with God. Initially, it's not going to be a very good dialogue. It's going to be like, a lot of times it's going to be like angry dialogue towards God. Upset about this law and that law and why this has happened to me and all these different things. I don't want to deal with my emotions. Someone else should have to deal with it. They're to blame. I'm not to blame. All these different things are going to come out of you. They are your anger blocks in dealing with your relationship with God. Does that make sense? And then after that, you'll start getting into some fears. And so you can start discussing your fears. I don't want to have to go around doing this teaching work when I'm getting lots and lots of people criticising me all the time. I don't know about you, but criticism doesn't feel that good to me at the moment, right? So what happens a lot of times, I say I'm Jesus, or I say, you know, I start talking about first century existence or something like that, and I just get a barrage from an audience, right? A lot of times this happens. Now, I go home and I go, do I really want to be doing this? Like putting myself in front of a couple of hundred people who half of the time or 3/4 of the time, all they want to do is just spend the time criticising me. Last week, I got quite a number of emails, as Mary will attest to, about all the things I did wrong last week in the groups and whatever, right? And all the personal things when somebody came up and asked me a question, what I should have said to them and what I didn't say and how unloving I was and all these different things. And you'd be surprised how this happens on a weekly basis, part of my law of attraction at the moment, right? And so I need to feel my way through that law of attraction and allow those emotions to come up. And what comes up for me is emotions like, wow, like I give my time for free. And it's mostly women who do this. So I get a group of women coming up and criticising me about how lack of...
Y es una mayoría, en su mayoría son mujeres las que hacen esto, no que la mayoría de las mujeres lo hagan. De ahí eso está mal.
I'm not gentle enough, and I'm not understanding enough, and I'm not kind enough, and I'm not... enough, and I said some things that they didn't like, and you know, and I get this list of things emailed back to me. Generally, it's a quite good because it's a pointed list, you know, got pointed list, very clear. And it's amazing how many times that happens. And so then I go into these emotions which I still need to clear. Why do I want to do this? Like I don't want to be Jesus. Who wants to be Jesus? Do you want to be Jesus instead? I'll let you be one. Like, and that's fine. You know, I'll just go into insignificance. But I love the truth. I love the divine truth, and this is my problem. You see, I love the divine truth more than I like being hammered on the weekend. Sort of thing. So a lot of the times, what happens now is that I'm in my passion, speaking the divine truth. I get hammered in return back. And so what I do then is I allow myself to go into the emotion, and I even talk about that with God. Like, what do you expect from me? You know, like I want some help here. Like, you know, I want some help here in sense of like, all I want is to be able to present the divine truth and not get hammered every time doing it. Right? And so I feel about those emotions, and I know many of you don't do that, right? Hammer me, I mean. And so I know many of you feel very appreciative, but see, with my emotional injury that I have at the moment, I don't feel that as much as I feel the times I get hammered, right? And this is what happens is until we do with these emotional injuries, the ones that are the triggering ones are the ones that are exposed within us. So I have to work my way through that emotion, feel those emotions. And some of the emotions that come up are like a fear of being attacked. Right? So that's a big emotion still for both myself and Mary. A fear of being physically, violently harmed in putting ourselves out there. One of the emails I got this week was pretty violent email about how I'm causing major delusion. I'm delusioned totally myself, of course, and then and of course Mary is too in this particular email, and then all of these different things about all of this untruth that I'm teaching, and that woe will be on me, and God will punish me, and God will, all of these things, like just lots and lots of stuff about their own anger, really. So we often get these kind of criticisms back, of course, because we're open with our email address and we're open with all these things. You just get your law of attraction kicking in. And what I do is allow myself to feel the fear of that. Like, what does that feel like? It feels terrible sometimes. And I allow myself to feel. And each time I allow myself to feel, I release a bit of that. And then the next time, it affects me far less. So that's how, like, years ago when I started doing this, like, you know, I'd get up in a group of 20 or 30, 3/4 would walk out in part of the way through the discussion generally with anger and rage, and then the rest would be actually listening for a while, but eventually they too would get into anger and rage about something I've said. And many of you in the future will, by the way, get into anger and rage about something I've said. And I feel that rage and I feel that anger. And before, what I would do is I'd go into this fear about people's anger, like start to tremble and feel shaky inside and feel really terrible inside. And so I'd be really worried, about all of their anger and I'd have a terror-based response, in other words, to their anger that I'd have to allow myself to feel. Let myself feel it. The next time it goes, it gets better. And I described last weekend how I've had some pretty major, people ringing up, threatening me to kill me and all sorts of things. And I've had to work my way through those emotions in terms of what that causes or triggers within me with regard to my fears. So the key...
A ver, un momento, por lo de las personas importantes, a ver si lo puedo pillar mejor, porque es una cosa como muy fuerte.
Sorts of things, and I've had to work my way through those emotions in terms of what that causes or triggers within me with regard to my fears. So the key is to allow your law of attraction, and that's the next thing I'd like to write down. The key things, and I've had to work my way through, ringing up, threatening me to kill me. I've had some pretty major, people ringing up.
O sea, aquí no es que sean personas importantes, como que la llama un ministro para amenazarle. No, claro. Esto también ahora que... O sea, como algunas, digamos, llamadas importantes así, llamadas gordas, digamos.
Threatened me to kill me and all sorts of things. And I've had to work my way through those emotions in terms of what that causes or triggers within me with regard to my fears. So the key is to allow your law of attraction, and that's the next thing I'd like to write down, is to allow your law of attraction to trigger your fear. So notice your law of attraction. I don't like using acronyms. Law of attraction, that stands for. Notice your law of attraction. So this week I had one man, a male. It's very important what gender too, right, is doing this with you. So this week I had one male man who is a religious zealot email me with lots of condemnatory stuff, right? And so I've got to look at that as a law of attraction thing. What's the law of attraction thing there? And that one man emailed both Mary and myself separately. So both Mary and myself has a law of attraction with that particular one. And then I had one lady emailing me specifically, addressing me specifically, saying different things about how I was unkind and not gentle and all these different things. And basically, the word she used quite often was uncool. I'm uncool. I'm uncool. So there was that's my law of attraction. That was a female sending me that email. So, poet, and I don't know. And none of you caught that one.
Ahí es que dos palabras en inglés que acaba de decir riman, y no sé por qué dice que ninguno pilló eso. Porque no se rieron a lo mejor antes de él decir la broma de soy poeta y no lo sé, que ahí en cada país se dirá de una manera, ¿no? Eso luego ya.
So I had a female sending me the email, and that is a very important part of my law of attraction in that particular event. Does that make sense? And so I've got to look at that. Then during the week, we had a number of spirit-based events occur, myself and Mary together, where different spirits came to talk and different spirits came to express themselves, and they had different emotions and so forth. And so that's part of our law of attraction, to allow ourselves to feel about that, what fears were involved in that. And the key is to work through those particular fears as well. Does that make sense? Your law of attraction tells you everything that's going on pretty much. Mary, you want to? just turn on this way. No.
I just wanted to add for the lady who asked the question about prayer, that sometimes I just pray to God to show me about this issue, and usually the answer comes in my law of attraction, but if I pray about it, it seems...
O sea, que me muestre cosas sobre el tema, sobre el problema en cuestión en concreto, que me muestres algo sobre este tema.
To really heighten the experience.
Seems to ramp up the law of
So
attraction.
even if I think, oh, I don't really know what's going on with me around this issue, but can you show me what is really happening for me emotionally?
Yeah.
Because sometimes I feel really far removed from the issue.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot you can do with prayer, lots you can do with prayer. And my suggestion with prayer is to notice when you pray, you can ramp up your own law of attraction. The problem with fear is we often don't want to. What we want to do most of the time is to suppress our fears, you see. And so we're trying to suppress our law of attraction about fear. I have quite often people coming up, but you're saying if I ramp up my law of attraction about fear, I'm afraid of dying in a car crash. But what do I do with that? Like if I ramp up my law of attraction, does that mean I'm going to have a car accident next week? And the answer is, well, yeah, you are afraid about a car accident every single day of your life, aren't you? So feel the fear. When you feel the fear of that, it will actually lessen the law of attraction about the issue, not the opposite way around. Right? See, a lot of times what we do is we think it's going to increase the law of attraction about the issue when we tune into the emotion. Because we're taught New Age teachings, again, they go down the track of saying, you know, what you got to do is use your mind and you zen out of that. And it doesn't change your law of attraction at all. I was talking with Josh last week when he was around and at our place, and he was saying how he went into that beautiful zen state, how you felt really zenned out and blissed, and yet law of attraction still, computer broke down and car broke down and whatever it was else that broke down, they all still happened. Yeah, and it's still happening, but because of the feeling like of meditating out of it, you get out of that law of attraction. The truth is the law of attraction is happening. If it's happening, you haven't dealt with it yet. Okay? And that's just a very basic truth. So if you haven't dealt with it yet, let yourself feel. All right, law of attraction has brought me this week 2 more criticisms, pretty intense criticism from one guy, violent sort of criticism. I've got to look at that. I've got to look at what's inside of me, what emotion inside of me is that triggering. Let myself feel that. Then,
Did you reply to the emails?
no.
So you just leave it?
Yeah, what I try to do myself is not project back at the person, right? So there are times when I've dealt with the emotion that I will then reply to the email, but the majority of the times what I will do myself is just feel the emotion. Until it's done, and I'll just reread the email. I print them out and reread. So you know how people say don't ever read your own hate mail? Well, I read all of my hate mail, right? So what I do is print it out. Mary's seen me do this quite often. Print it out and I reread it. You know, go off and do it, reread it again and see. And in the end, once I can read it and I've now dealt with the emotion, you can feel that within yourself where you're feeling a space of love with the person. Now, if I want to, I address the issue with the person. Whatever that issue might be. A lot of times by then, though, they've emailed me back saying sorry. Do you know what I mean? That often happens as a result of you working through your emotion and getting into a place of forgiveness where the person basically works through theirs as well. So that's often happened. But if that hasn't happened, then, and I feel there is some issues to address in truth, then I'll address those issues. Yeah.
realmente hay algunos asuntos que tratar en verdad. Y para remarcarlo aquí elegí poner sobre la verdad porque creo que puede valer también muy bien para resonar ahí con in truth, dice. O sea, en verdad, en realidad, hay algunos asuntos que tratar. Entonces, bueno, luego hablamos.
And I suggest for you to do that as well. Try to avoid this reprojection of stuff back at the person, because what you end up with is just a tennis match. You know, one of those tennis matches where you go hit, the other one, you know, hit, and, you know, it's like hit, you know, and you know, ones that sometimes like, oh, that was a good rally, but it just lasts 25 minutes and it seemed a bit boring to watch, right? And that's what happens to our life a lot. We finish up entering into these transactions that all they are is hitting the emotion back and forward, but not actually feeling the emotion. So stay in the transaction emotionally and feel the emotion. When you stay in the transaction emotionally and feel the emotion, you will notice changes in the dialogue if you enter into a dialogue after that. You will notice changes where one of you shifts and the other one starts to shift and so forth. And eventually you get to a point, and in some cases we've had points where, you know, we've had dialogues for 10 or 15 times after I've dealt with the emotion. And then in the end, we said, well, that's enough now. Basically, this person is still projecting anger and hatred and whatever else, and it's time for us to stop and say that's enough, you know? And you'll feel that time inside of yourself when you're starting to be unloving towards yourself. But you won't avoid emotionally what's going on. So that's why I find it's good to read all the hate mail and deal with all of that emotionally. And in the process of that, obviously, things change. And your law of attraction changes, events change, different things get attracted to you, and you notice your attraction's changing, and you can see, wow, I've dealt with that. You know, I've really dealt with that particular issue now. So now when I'm in a group like this and I get projected at me lots of anger and hatred, my back, I used to get terrible back pain, so bad that I couldn't sit down after the group. And so what I'd have to do is sort of bend over and sort of like in a fetal position, bending over and just cry until the back pain was released. And that was all just unworthy feelings coming from that anger and rage and so forth. So I just allow myself to do that and then feel like going off next weekend and doing another talk and triggering the same thing. And then you get to a point where, wow, that's not there anymore. And even though I've got maybe some anger or other projections coming, I still don't feel that anymore. And you know then that everything's been released. All right, let's get back to our daily stuff. Everyone's okay with that so far? Okay. What I suggest you do too is buy a journal. So if you haven't bought a journal already, my suggestion is buy one. And in the journal, have a page, and you might eventually need 2 or 3 pages with this particular one, but in a journal, have a page that you go to, and whenever you're angry, you write down what the event was about. Whenever you were slightly annoyed, you write down what the event was about. Whenever you were irritated, you write down what the event was about. Does that make sense? So what that basically I would call is an anger list. But you don't have to do it all at once. Like you can just, you know, write down what you're angry about, what you can remember, but then let it change. It will change with you, right, as you're changing. Allow yourself to note down the things you're angry. So this week, what was I angry about? I was angry about, I can't remember what I was angry about this week because I was mostly sad this week. What about the previous week? I was a bit upset about the woman who emailed me those things. You know? So that was slight annoyance, I'd call that. So write that on my anger list. Slight annoyance, woman sending nasty email, you know, whatever that's about. Do you know what I mean? Write that on the list. You don't have to deal with it at this point. You just write it on the list. Because sometimes you know, you're not feeling the emotion of it, right? But it happened. The event happened. So write down the event, what happened. So write down that. And what did I feel from that event? A bit of, you know, annoyance or whatever. Write down that too. But couldn't get into anything, just, you know, so another thing happens and another thing happens. And if you write them all down, the things that made you angry, then once a week, look at that list. So you look at the list for the last week. Make sense? And look at that list, and now use your mind, because at the moment it's pointless using our emotions at this point because we're disconnected from our fear and we're disconnected from our grief and so forth. So instead, use your mind, because that's the tool available to us in this state. Use our mind to make a fear list from the anger list. Do you follow me? So we do a fear list from the anger list. So like I was slightly annoyed about this lady. What's my fear? Don't have to think about it. Just allow yourself to pray about it and let some intuition come through. This is where your spirit guides can help you a lot as well. And just write down what you suspect it might be about. It doesn't have to be right at this point, because what we're trying to do is open our awareness. That's what we're trying to do. You see that? We're trying to stretch ourselves and open our awareness. So open your awareness into the fears that you have and start writing down. Relate your anger to your fear, in other words. Join the dots together. That anger is actually about that fear. Right? That anger that I had there was about me being afraid of that. So for example, I might be angry that you rang up the plumber today and he didn't come today. Your first thought might be to ring up the plumber again and give him an earful. You promised you were coming today. Why didn't you come today? So instead of doing that, you're upset, right? So write down, what were you afraid of there? What are you afraid of? Could be all sorts of things, couldn't it? Could be the toilet's not working, and now you're starting to have the number 2 generate, right? And you're afraid about.
Esto es traducción literal. Por no llamar a la caca caca, ha hecho el gesto ahí y lo llaman opción número 2. Ahí tendré que poner algo. Y tienes miedo de salir. Claro.
Going outside. It could be just a fear of comfort. You see what I'm saying? A fear of discomfort could be just the thing driving you.
Y aquí hace un pareado también, que se dice uno de los participantes.
Sorry.
Aquí en castellano habría que buscar una rima para intestino.
Bow. You're a poet and you don't know it all. And Mary, what do you want to say, David? Might as well have this microphone if you're going to say things on a regular basis.
I was just going to say that sometimes it's not a fear for me. It's not a fear directly related. For me, the plumber not coming would be a fear about me.
Que dice, no es un miedo para mí. O sea, hay estado dubitativa. Porque quiere decir, porque ahora lo explica.
Like I'm afraid of feeling unloved.
Yes.
So it's not a fear about the plumber. It's a fear about the emotion that the plumber is triggering.
Yeah. Often there's no seeming relationship between the two. When I say no seeming relationship, there is always a reason why you go into anger, and it's always fear-based generally, right? But often when we first look at it, there is often no relationship between the two. And so what we've got to do is trust some intuition here. What's this about? What am I feeling about? So I remember, and Monica, do you mind me saying something about when you were with us? All right. So Monica stayed with us for a few days out of the eco tent, and she came up one morning, and I said to Monica the night before, I don't want you to use candles in the tent. What would you feel about that? Jen's okay, but who?
Ahí es que alguien debe haber dicho algo, Jen, y comenta eso que no sabemos muy bien.
See, it depends on emotion is in you, what you feel about that. Monica had a man who's telling her about free will, controlling her free will. That's what she thought, right? And so you went into the emotion about being angry with AJ, hypocritical AJ, doing his stuff. Like, so we're in the anger state here, right? So this is the anger. When we started dealing with the fear, when we linked the next morning, Monica was truthful with me. She said, I'm angry with you. I said, okay, why are you angry? Because you told me I can't light a candle when I've got free will. I'm allowed to do anything I want. And for a start, that's not what free will is. That's a false belief about free will, by the way. Because God, the belief that God, the truth about free will is you're allowed to do anything you want, but there is a consequence to every action you do, right? That's the second half that we usually ignore, right? We chuck that one away. We say we're just allowed to do whatever we want, right? But anyway, so she comes up and says, oh, yeah, you didn't allow my free will. I said, yes, I did, actually. You had the free will to stay in my cabin under the terms I've given you, or you had the free will to go home. So that's free will. I've given you free will. No, 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 no. We had this discussion, didn't we, Monica? No, no, that's not true. That's not true. You know, you're just trying to get away from the fact now that you're trying to control me and rah, rah. Anyway, I said, Monica, this is not what it's about at all. Let's delve into the fear of what it's about. And in the end, it was whenever Monica felt a man didn't give her what she wanted, the man didn't love her. And this was related to dad, right? Father feeling unloved from dad. And whenever dad didn't give her what she wanted, then it meant dad didn't love her. Now, as soon as Monica said that, bang, she was in the cause of motion. Like a few seconds, 4 hours of tears afterwards, wasn't it? And so what happens a lot of times is we can get through these layers quite readily and quickly as long as we're speaking the truth of them. So if Monica had come up and said, oh, I said, how are you? Like, no, it's not. Oh, it was fine, you know. And what do you feel today? Oh, I'm okay. Now, we would have never got to talk about how angry she was with me for a start, would we? All right? And so we're not in a state of truth now, are we? So can the emotion flow? No. The emotion will not flow while you're in a state of untruth. The only emotions that flow in a state of untruth are self-deception anyway. Right? So she gets into the emotion, the anger, and now we're stepping down. Now we're starting to step down, right, through the layers. If you avoid all of that, you're not stepping down through any layer. So you're never going to get to the basic emotion in the end. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah? Okay. By the way, when I say the words, does that make sense? It often means that I feel that quite a number of you are not making sense of that. But anyway. All right. So do your anger list, do a fear list. Fear list, very handy. Relate it to your anger list. All right? And then the next step is to choose one of those fears, and what I suggest to you is choose the biggest one. So what we often do is choose the smallest one, and if you want to do that, you can do that. But to be honest with you, the biggest fear is going to have the biggest result when you release it. Makes sense? So what we do is choose one of those fears, and we focus our prayer and attention on that fear. Now, I don't mean we go, please help me feel this fear next week. That's not focusing our attention on the fear. That's not being truthful necessarily. What I need to do, all right, I need to be honest with this fear for a start. I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel this. You know, we talked about what we don't want to feel. Why don't you want to feel it? What we got about why you don't want to feel it. What's going on inside of you that causes you to not want to feel that fear? Why are you avoiding this fear? Oh, because it could be any reason, couldn't it? It could be hundreds of different reasons. I'm afraid I'll die if I feel that. It wasn't my fault in the first place that I had this. You know, we can go off a long list, say all of the things you feel. say them all. And then focus on triggering that fear during the week. So set your intention to address the fear. I don't mean to connect with it necessarily. I mean to be honest about it all week. Focus your intention on being honest about it for the entire week. That fear. So somebody comes up and says, how are you going today? Oh, I've just realised this week that I've got a really big fear. And just say what it is. And then, you come home from work and the husband asks, how are you doing? Well, I just noticed my fear come up quite a few times today. Talk about the fear. Talk about what it is. Talk about, allow yourself to stay connected with it during the week. Right. So what you do then is you go to the movie to one of the movie places on a Tuesday. Usually that's the cheap movie night, right? And so what you do is you borrow out your 5 videos about that fear, right? And that becomes your focus for the rest of the week. So one of the nights you sit down and you breathe, you're breathing diaphragmatically, because now you're going to watch the Emily Rose movie or something, and fear about spirits, or whatever it is that you're connecting with, you see. So if I'm afraid about being alone, I'll go and watch a movie that's about being alone. If I'm afraid of earth change events, I'll go and get movies about earth change events. If I'm afraid of violence, I'll go and hire 5 violent movies. Right? If I'm afraid of rape, I go and hire some movies with rape portrayed in them. Right? And what I do is I connect to the fear of this. Now, many of you are going to feel like AJ's just crazy now, like he's suggesting some things that are way out of line now, right? And I can feel those projections, so, but I'm saying to you that this is how you get under your fears. There's some grief and other emotions in here for you. And if you allow yourself to actually do this, you'll find yourself getting into those underlying emotions. Right? Now, you'll be amazed at what type of movies you choose. And sometimes, if you, like with a violent movie, if you're afraid of violence, sometimes you can choose gentle movies and they trigger you. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes it's the flip side that actually triggers you. So use some intuition when you're at the video store, or use some intuition about what other people have told you this week are good movies to watch or good books to read. So somebody can...
Aquí en realidad dice en la tienda de vídeos, no sé si sería literal, no sé si en Australia es así como se llama, un videoclub que no sé en el año 2009 si seguía habiendo, la verdad, pero bueno, donde alquilen los vídeos, parece que sí, pero no importa. Vale.
Comes up and says, there's this book called, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, Dr. Susan Jeffers. You go, I'm not afraid, don't need to look at that book. Now, there's your law of attraction just happened there, right? Your law of attraction just happened. Go and get that book. If you can't get it from the library, go and buy it. And then read it. That's your law of attraction. Somebody's brought that to you. So quite often, I've looked at the title of the book going, ugh, I don't know why this is my law of attraction. Open it up, start reading, and wow, it's triggering all sorts of things. Not what the person thought. Most of the time it's nothing to do with what the person thought who's giving me the book. But often it's totally different things being triggered. But there's my law of attraction. Right? Same goes with the movies. So tomorrow what we're going to do is spend a bit more time on that. Give you some movies, books, whatever. And just again, use your law of attraction. One way I do that sometimes, and that you might work for you, is just read the title out to yourself and just breathe a little and see which titles make your body change. So if you feel a bit teary reading a title, get that title. If you feel a bit anxious reading a title, you get that title. Does that make sense? And just go through the list. Feel a bit scared about that title, get that title, and you just go through the list like that, get 4 or 5, if that's what you've got the time to do, 1 if you haven't, and allow yourself to focus your intention on looking at this particular fear, seeing it for what it is, right? Not avoiding it, seeing it for what it is. I'm not saying that you want to deal with it. Because to be honest, if you're not already dealing with it, you probably don't want to deal with it. So start talking to God about you not wanting to deal with it. Talk to others about how you don't want to deal with it. You know, but be honest about it. You see, it's the truth that sets everything free. Everything, including all of your emotions, get set free by the truth. And so you're not going to get anywhere saying, oh, please help me feel this particular emotion, when in reality you do not wish to do it. Do the opposite of that. I don't want to feel this emotion. So be honest about that. Don't just shut up, but be open about how you really feel inside of yourself, even with God. Remember, this path is about connecting with God, right? This means telling God everything you feel, not just the good things. You know, we're taught from a very young age in religious movements, you know, only talk to God about the good things, because otherwise God will punish you if you talk about the bad things, right? Often we feel that. That's not how it is. God wants to know everything. God already knows everything. About you. Often in your speaking it, now you know it when you start speaking it, you see. Often God's there looking down and you're saying, I'm praying about that particular thing, but that's not what's happening with the law of attraction right now. It's interesting that, right? If you can imagine yourself being in that position, like looking down at everyone in humanity and going, oh, look at that law of attraction working there. You imagine in one day on your own life, like there's literally hundreds of events where God's going, yes, there's again, another law of attraction, skip over, another law of attraction, skip over, look at that going on there. And then the person says, oh, I want to know about it. Oh, God's in action then, right? One person wants to know about their law of attraction and what's going on. And trust me, this is how God feels. God feels so enthused when one person just wants to connect with their true law of attraction, right? And they want to know about it. Of course, God's going to do all sorts of things to help you know about that. Now, the trouble is I can't talk to the person as they are because they've got so much resistance towards me, but I can talk to Joe Bloggs over here. I can get this spirit, who you call an angel, over here to help them out there, and I can get their guide here to help them out, and their wife's actually quite a bit mediumistic too. I might be able to just manoeuvre that a little, and this is how, like, God knows, of course, what he can and can't do, and so he does it just to help you connect with yourself. If you can think of God like that. There, it will help you a lot. God feels very personable towards you, and God's always interested in your underlying emotional state, and God's always wanting you to actually work through the underlying causal emotion. And God, the saying is, will move heaven and earth. Well, maybe not quite that, because that would be breaking other laws, but God will do quite a few things from a spiritual and emotional and physical perspective in order for you to have that emotion triggered in you when you really want it. Right? So start talking to God like that, like a friend. And I'm not saying like your current friends, because a lot of your current friends, you say, you know, they come up to you and say, how are you? And you go, oh, I'm okay. Yeah. I can't tell them how I really feel, because how I really feel is a bit about them, actually. And they'll get upset, you know, when I tell them that. No, I won't say that, right? And so, but with God, it's different, because God already knows how you feel, and we've got to get used to talking to God about how we feel, understanding that. When we understand that, we start connecting with our emotion. When we connect with our emotion, things flow. That's a very important thing to understand. So, anger list, fear list, and then the next step was to actually do one of the fears, right? So when we say do it, we focus on one fear. Now, my suggestion is to focus on the fear that your law of attraction is already bringing you. That's the easiest thing to do. You go up the back there with the mic.
Would you say a genetic disease is also law of attraction? I'm having my grandmother had it and my mother, and it just hit me 5 years ago. And
Yep.
yeah.
Every event, every disease, every single thing that ever happens to you in the course of a day is all the result of a law of attraction. Now, the key is to take away blame, right? Because most of the time when I say that, then people go, oh, so I'm to blame. No, most of the time there's this multi-generational error to blame, right? But the truth is it's now inside of yourself. And the truth is also that any genetic problem can be repaired with God's love. So if we look at those two truths and we see that, all right, all that's stopping the repairing of this problem is my own resistance. So there's something going on inside of me emotionally that causes it. Now, where that emotion comes from does not matter. What matters is me connecting to it and releasing it. So this is where you get away from judging yourself about the emotion and start getting into just saying, I'm allowed to feel my emotions. Because to be honest, most of the time, our emotion never came from our own life. Now, our emotion, the diseases that we get and so forth can often come from spirit attachments and other sources, but all of that is still based upon emotional attraction.
So spirit attachment can also release through
Yes.
feelings. Or could I talk there? I mean, I have tried a lot.
The only way to release a spirit attachment is by dealing with your emotions. Right? Because what happens often the time is we can talk to a group of spirits who are attached to a certain emotion in us, that group of spirits moves off, and all that happens is another group of spirits move in who have the same emotion. And this is why many people who are mediumistic in the audience have this constant cycle of certain type of spirits coming in all the time. And that's because of our emotions. But if we raise our emotions and we deal with the emotions, experience them and release them, then the same law of attraction no longer occurs. And when people come to visit us from a spirit world, we also are not affected in the same way by their visits. So it's a bit like, I'm still feeling a lot.
Y ahí acaba de golpe, porque están partidos así esta segunda parte de la primera sesión sobre el miedo, que se llama, como hemos visto. Y Claudia se tiene que ir dentro de unos minutos. Esta última mujer que ha hablado, aquí se referiría al hablar con el espíritu, en este caso. Creo que se refiere a eso. Pero Miller le lleva a lidiar con eso, con tu emoción y tal.
¿Por qué no sería Dios y van ahí?
¿Dónde?
Porque cuando dice hablar, no habla con Dios. ¿Por qué sería desde...?
Pues vamos a verlo, sí.
So could I talk there? I mean, I have tried a lot.
Es que lo que
porque ahí está.
Lo que dice literalmente es, podría hablar ahí. Entonces, yo, para hacerlo, o sea, lo primero que salió era esto, pues la traducción literal de there.
No, pero ahí la respuesta de Jesús también es a los espíritus.
Sí,
Claro.
está hablando de ahora justo de un espíritu que a lo mejor parece que lo ha localizado muy claramente, que a lo mejor tiene además, si se le ha pegado ya desde la concepción, lo cual tendría que ver con la enfermedad genética que ha perturbado los procesos genéticos,
Claro.
ese apego, esa medio posesión, digamos, de corporal que a veces pasa. Entonces, claro. Entonces lo que dice literal es eso, podría hablar ahí. Y por eso dije, bueno, pues vamos a poner aquí, en ese caso, para que sea un poco más explicativo, por así decirlo. Pero bueno, es lo mismo. Así que así acaba, es 1 hora y poco, que nos ha costado un poco más, por eso de que voy parando, por si acaso no sé qué.
No, pero está súper interesante. Como mucho de, bueno, como nos pasa generalmente, está todo relacionado, uno no puede dejar de contemplar las otras cuestiones, como viene la ley de la atracción, y tuvo un pedazo importante del taller, claro.
Sí. que hay cosas ahí, hay puntos algo delicados en algún momento, cuando habla de, a ver si lo recuerdo bien, que habla de no tener miedo. Es que con la pantalla no puedo tampoco recordar muy bien, pero bueno, una parte, no sé si os viene, donde es un tema así como un poquito más liado, escabroso, pero bueno, no sé qué palabras usar para buscarlo dentro del texto. Bueno, ¿queréis comentar también algo así ya que haya surgido fuertemente también Ana Pilar o tú?
Cedo, Anita, yo tomé nota de algunas cosas, pero a ver, Anita, ¿qué dice?
Pues volvemos ahí.
Yo por la velocidad tendría que haber pedido que frenen unas 5 veces.
Sí.
Pero bueno, anoté lo de 5 minutos al día, el de hacer ese ejercicio, sentir el cuerpo, conectar con la emoción. Eso es lo único que anoté y bueno, como que da más pistas, más detalles, más herramientas, como para sentir, herramientas para sentir.
Sí, yo es que voy parando a ratos, pero hay que parar. Si el inglés va mucho más rápido y en el español hay muchas más palabras muchas veces, y entre eso y que está bien y se nos va la vista también porque hay que mirar lo que está, los gestos que hace, pues es lógico que da muy poco tiempo para mirar.
Claro.
Sí, pero cosas concretas de que queramos volver así en unos minutillos antes de que se vaya Clau. Tú te tienes que ir, Clau.
Igual puedo flexibilizar, no es una visita y di un horario, pero no es un trabajo así que es riguroso. Lo que quería contar era que la cuestión de la emoción opuesta, que me pareció sumamente interesante y que destituye un poco a lo que venimos comentando y comparando con la intervención desde la nueva era, incluso desde el lado de la psicología, el pensamiento positivo, o sea, todas esas corrientes que no nos invitan, porque a mí no se me hubiera ocurrido, honestamente, profundizar, o sea, como que, claro, yo reconozco, lo reconozco que no puedo sentir, como esa vez en el video que empecé a llorar cuando hablamos con vos, Iván, reconozco que no puedo sentir, pero quiero salirme de ahí, ¿se entiende? O sea, no tolero la impotencia, sería, o la incompetencia, no la soporto, porque si recordamos, cuando hizo Mary el taller del yo herido,
Pero
ella reconocía.
no la soportas porque no la sientes.
Ah, bien. Ella reconocía que éramos muy duros con nosotros mismos, que no había compasión.
Te vas un paso más para no. No es,
a ver.
Es que seamos muy duros, es que no somos humildes en el sentido de que no nos permitimos en ese momento dejar todo lo aprendido, digamos, como fachada y decir, vale, incluso meter a Dios en la película, que no hace falta en siempre, como él ha dicho mismo, pero decir, para estar sintonizarte con la verdad de tu estado emocional, no quiero sentir que no soporto la incompetencia. Entonces,
exacto.
Claro.
Exacto. Sí, y ahora...
Entonces, la relación que tú querías hacer, ahora vamos a ella. ¿Cómo encaja ahora la relación que tú querías decir de cómo somos muy duros con nuestro yo herido? No, es que en ese momento no estamos sintiendo el yo herido. En ese momento estamos no queriendo ser verdaderos con nuestro estado emocional, que es no quiero sentir la incompetencia como tal. Es decir, siento que no soy lo suficiente, que en tu caso no valgo para mi padre, pero tu padre era como una proyección con un miedo tremendo a la existencia, ¿no? Que hemos hablado muchas veces, debía ser eso. Entonces, no me siento para nada valiosa, competente, lo que sea, Entonces, en vez de sentir eso, lo que hemos visto es que desde muy pequeños todos hemos hecho, en cada caso, con lo que sea, toda una costra de fachada para no sentir humildemente la pena por sentirnos no valiosos para los que nos pueden matar. En ese momento los padres tienen el poder de matar, porque el niño no es nada, no se puede defender. Por ejemplo, ¿no? Matar o lo que sea. Entonces, claro, eso, no somos verdaderos, y este es el sentido de lo que hemos visto en el fondo, ¿no? De humildad, verdad y amor. Aquí es donde se ve. Claro, entonces el yo herido no es el... Dale,
no, quería decir que tendemos, y lo hablé con mi hijo, que conté en la llamada ayer, que mi hijo me llama en la madrugada, y yo tiendo, y fíjate, claro, ahí como yo estoy en negación, que es lo que vos me decís, vos no estás conectada con esa emoción, o sea que no hay registro para mí, ¿no? Claro, entonces yo tampoco puedo acompañar a nadie a entrar ahí porque yo no me lo permito. Entonces yo al revés, que sos un alma todopoderosa, que tu verdadero padre, tu verdadera madre, bla, 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 pero no, claro, o sea, justamente es, vamos a sentir juntos, porque yo tampoco soy capaz, y lloremos, a unirme a llorar con él, que hubiera sido una maravilla, esa llamada de mi hijo que estaba justamente creyendo que me necesitaba, que necesitaba escuchar mi voz, y podríamos haber llorado juntos, ahora que entiendo la ley, y podríamos habernos desahuciado mutuamente, liberando justamente esto. Nunca voy a ser capaz, o sea, entremos ahí juntos, porque yo tengo la mía, digamos. Yo tengo mi herida relacionada con eso. Viene a través de mi padre, pero a él fue al que yo deseé abortar. Entonces, teníamos distintas maneras, digamos, argumentos.
Que era Pablo el que llamó hace poco. Entonces.
Ajá, Pablo me llamó, sí. Y él tiene esos momentos en los que entra, no sé si está, supongo yo, por supuesto que está como todos poseído, decimos así, ¿no? Sí. Entonces hay una intensidad y él me suele llamar, me ha llamado a las 4 de la mañana, a las 5 de la mañana, solamente quiero escucharte. Y me llamó ayer a la noche, o sea, ya era así la noche. Claro, y yo ahora me doy cuenta que...
Habrá más oportunidades, no pasa nada, o sea,
Claro, no, digo, ahora descubro el poder que tiene entrar en la emoción opuesta. Como dice él, es el desencadenante, o sea, es como la máxima expresión de la humildad, sería, ¿no? Para mí, porque ya es real, o sea, es emocional y no es un discurso, como dice él, la oración, sino que es real, estoy atravesando esto que mi alma grabó como una verdad, estoy eliminando el error y ahora habrá lugar para la verdad, pero no esto de querer meter la verdad, como pasa con la famosa ley de atracción y todo, pienso positivo, que no deja de ser un cambio lento, que se produce, que actúa, pero que no es a largo plazo.
Sí, es como
lo que hablaba de...
es como forzar y por lo tanto, sí.
Claro, con lo que hablaba de George, digamos, y pasan otras cosas, porque claro, yo tapo el sol con un dedo y creo que ya no está, pero siguen pasando otras cosas, sí. Eso para mí fue muy importante hoy, porque le dio profundidad a esto.
Sí, lo hemos visto un poco algunas veces, lo que pasa es que hasta que realmente se asienta, porque sí, si esas veces que lo hemos visto un poco lo hubiéramos realmente practicado y asimilado, pues no estaríamos igual, ¿no? Pero lo que iba a decir es otra cosa, que es, la oración del amor divino, entonces, es como para hacer el marco, ¿no? Para el marco para esto. O sea, es decir, pues porque, o sea, no se trata ahora de abandonar, por ejemplo, la oración del amor divino, incluso el aprendizaje de memoria de ella, que no tiene por qué ser ritual tampoco, porque es como para afinarnos, no para sacarnos de la emoción, sino para todo lo contrario, e involucrar a Dios y los guías celestiales a ser posible, o por lo menos hacer el gesto de, bueno, aquí estoy, vamos a hacer eso, y luego sí, incorporar a ella toda esta historia, ¿no? O sea, que toda la lista que estamos diciendo, la lista de ira y de miedos asociada a la ira, y luego tratar con el miedo, pues de eso, o sea, se puede hacer preparatoriamente para ese trabajo, se puede, por ejemplo, la ley o sea, la oración del amor divino como una especie de, porque fijaros que ahí ya estás hablando, o sea, la oración estás hablando con Dios, estás diciendo, sé que soy, o sea, y quiero reconocer que soy la más grande de las creaciones, no sé qué, y te empiezas a abrir como eso, pero sí, claro, hay peligro de hacerla ritual, pero eso, una vez que ya tenemos esto claramente, de qué práctico es y que hay que hablarle sobre lo que queremos, incluso enfadarnos con Dios y todo eso, pues ahí encaja. No sé si me...
Sí, yo no sé. Comprendo, gracias.
Sí, claro, me lo digo a mí también.
Claro,
Porque...
es muy claro y práctico. Es muy claro y práctico y con la verdad. Volvemos al origen de humildad, verdad y amor. Humildemente reconocer que este sentir que, bueno, quiero, pero no siento. No siento que resulte, no siento que sea así, no siento. Y en eso de ser sincero, porque te dice, insiste siempre en que Dios quiere la verdad, bueno, ahí entiendo que se produce el milagro de conectar, porque está siendo absolutamente humilde y sincero, digamos, ese es el punto al que
Sí,
queremos.
como que te ha calado los juntos que van como en ciclo, la humildad y la sinceridad, que van como muy juntas. Es decir, yo me abro a ser honesto con realmente estoy sintiendo que no quiero esto, y entonces eso ayuda a realizar la humildad como deseo, pero realizarla materialmente, con una oración, hablar con Dios, es decir, con los guías. Desear, porque la humildad era un deseo, desear sentir todas las cosas y pero fijaros, ¿no? Cómo van juntas, entonces lo que has dicho, la verdad, o sea, tengo que ser sincero y eso me abre a poder desear más humildad y entonces puedo desear más verdad sobre mí mismo personal para que esa verdad personal pueda ser transformada hacia cada vez más universal, es decir, más verme tal como Dios me ve, ya, o sea, traspasar los errores para poder asimilar, más allá de las palabras, eso como un estar en el alma sin importarme estar, digamos, entre comillas, con Dios. Bueno, y sin comillas, si hemos recibido amor divino, se lo pedimos. Y pues en el... o sea, vamos a cada vez tener más claro esto, de que realmente estamos ya establecidos ahí de esa otra manera, pero o sea que ahora me he ido para incluir más cosas, me he ido por algo también esencial, pero claro, ese juego entre humildad y verdad, vamos a seguir con él, porque comentar esto sí.
Claro, claro, me parece que es como que rondar en esas tres cuestiones, dijo de pronto. Di tú, Claudia.
No, iba a decir en el todo bien y vos, que me reí porque como ese automatismo tan simple resume un poco lo que estamos diciendo, ¿no? Incluso a uno mismo, en el saludo al otro, pero a uno mismo, ¿no? Esto de todo bien, o yo había comentado una vez algo que puse que eran las viñetas de esta gente que logra en una imagen dibujar y representar algo tan profundo. A mí me gustan mucho las viñetas. Y bueno, y buscaba, sí, claro, era una persona que tenía atravesada la cabeza con una flecha y decía, pero todo bien, todo bien, ¿eh? Y atravesaba una flecha que le pasaba por la cabeza. Y me río porque todos un poco así, ¿no? Estamos
Sí, y las ciudades todos apiñados, sin poder expresar la ira, sin que te llamen a la policía, pero expresándola también, entonces, de forma ya a lo bestia, cuando ya tienen que entonces llamar a la policía. Entonces está y todos mientras con la fachada así, "Ay, vamos por la calle, ay, qué bien, sí, ¿verdad? Pues sí, esta semana no sé cuántos".
Claro, sí, 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 no hay espacio para eso y tampoco uno lo quiere hacer lugar, digamos, todas las respuestas cortas, breves, rápidas. Ahora se regula la velocidad de los audios, viste que puedes elegir que el audio, por lo menos en WhatsApp, puedes elegir que el audio vaya a la velocidad normal o lo acelerás. Y escuchás tipo las ardillitas de Walt Disney, las escuchaba las personas porque está muy apurado. Eh, es muy, la verdad es que sí, es el mundo de la prisa y no hay espacio ni tiempo para eso.
Pero por otro lado está el tema de una cordialidad así entre los vecinos o cosas así, o la gente del barrio, de la zona, es decir, interesarse por ellos, pero es en realidad contraproducente muchas veces porque es falso, ¿no? La mayor parte de veces. Bueno, me tengo que ir al servicio y ahora enseguida vuelvo corriendo porque
Vale,
se me lío.
no, está bien, está bien.
¿Cómo dice que no está bien saludar a los vecinos?
No, dijo que tiene su vuelta, digamos, o sea, que tiene su riesgo, no dijo la palabra riesgo, no me acuerdo qué dijo, pero dijo, claro, que hoy en día abrirse, bueno, las condiciones del entorno no son muy favorables. Entonces no siempre esta cordialidad, o sea, en la parte pequeña, como que en el círculo pequeño se puede abrir un poco la cuestión, menos fachadosa y más amorosa. Pero claro, depende todo de las circunstancias. A mí me pasó, por ejemplo, con Gustavo, que nos reencontramos, explico para quien escuche, que es el papá de mis hijos, entonces me escucha hablar de la tristeza, entonces me dice, ay, pero dice, yo te pregunto, hola Clau, ¿cómo estás? Y yo les contesto, hoy me siento bien, incluyendo al enojo que llevo conmigo. Y entonces eso ya, no, pero ahí ya la respuesta le molesta.
Totalmente.
¿Por qué
Claro.
tenés que incluir a la tristeza y al enojo? ¿Por qué tenés que...? No entiendo tu respuesta, no entiendo. ¿Por qué si
Claro, me repite
estoy
la
bien
pregunta.
con el enojo? ¿Por qué tenés que mencionar el enojo? Yo te grabaría, me
Claro.
dijo Gustavo. Yo te grabaría para que vos escuches cuántas veces decís la palabra tristeza. ¿Cuántas veces? ¿Por qué?
Ajá,
¿Por qué hablas de la tristeza? Entonces,
claro.
qué bajón
Ahí
contigo.
le decís, me va a poner triste.
Claro,
Con
y
el-
justamente que lo compartimos, la ley de la atracción y todo lo que dice Jesús, bueno, sí, esta pregunta de que a mí, ¿qué me trae? ¿Cómo resuena? Y justamente sí, para mí no había cosa más desafiante que poder explicar, que incluso, bueno, ahí Jesús lo representa básicamente bien, con el tema de la resistencia y los ataques. Y
Pues
bueno,
estabais
justamente
con el tema de que Gustavo, así con su cordialidad de, bueno, ¿qué tal? No sé cuántos, porque hay como dos usos de la cordialidad, porque sí que la cordialidad por lo menos te da pie a que la gente te diga cosas, porque si ya ni siquiera no hay ni un qué tal, pues tampoco puede haber una, entre comillas, buena cordialidad, en el sentido de que ahora Gustavo pues dijera, a ver, sí, pues voy a ver qué pasa por aquí, si me está diciendo estas cosas, no sé qué. Bueno,
claro, sí, sí, totalmente. Yo lo que trataba en ese momento de comprender era llevarlo un poco hacia mí, como dice Jesús acá, lo que representaba para mí ese cuestionamiento E incluso lo tomé bien, porque ya recordé una vez que hablé con vos con el tema del dolor y después leí el libro de ¿Cuál es tu tesoro? Que había hecho de la enfermedad también otra fachada. Ay, estoy enferma, todos giran alrededor de mí, atiéndanme, qué sé yo. Que lo vi un poco con Andrew también. Y bueno, entendí incluso cuando él me dice eso, digo, bueno, a ver, estoy claro, no estoy queriendo sentir, entonces mi disfraz, que es muy propio ahora de la arrogancia de estar triste todo el tiempo, o sea, al otro extremo, ¿no?
Mm.
No atravesar, sino que vivir la tristeza. Entonces lo tomé un poco como también, claro, yo ahora otra vez usando, digamos, el maquillaje, hoy me maquillo, quiero estar triste. Pero en realidad, claro, no, ahora con lo vivo y ahora que sé lo que interviene el cuerpo, que todo el tiempo está involucrado, al ser honesto, ¿no? El proceso, reconozco que, claro, sí, entonces por ahí le molestaba, pero a mí me ayudó, o sea, no, su molestia le corresponde a él, digamos, su incomodidad, pero yo tomé para mí esto que él me decía como que todo el tiempo, todo el tiempo. Entonces sí, eso sí lo tomé para mí. Como diciendo, a ver, sí, realmente estoy haciendo de esto un estado constante para no sentir, para quedarme acá. Otro personaje sería, algo así.
Ujú.
Ajá, me sirvió, o sea, no, me sirvió para verme a través del otro también. Sí, así que muy
Bien.
interesante, me gustó mucho.
Sí, y la siguiente hora está muy bien también. O sea, ¿queréis volver a algún otro punto en concreto? Aquí ese punto donde comenta que el opuesto del miedo es la verdad, está muy bien, muy pertinente. Como ya vimos en un vídeo más breve, ahí todo lo que está pasando, todo lo que nos pasa en el fondo es para tapar eso, ¿no?
Claro, sí, yo eso me acuerdo que él lo dijo, que era importante tenerlo en claro, sí,
Mm.
totalmente. Y bueno, hay una reticencia, la verdad, que la explica muy bien, hiciste un artículo incluso.
Sí, esa parte,
Ajá.
o sea, la parte de la transcripción de eso, sí, traducida. Te refieres a lo mejor.
A la aversión a la verdad que tenemos.
Ujú. Y aquí, pues eso, la segunda de estas, la hora final de este primer día, pues van a ser un poco de canalización. No lo he visto aún, pero cuando lo tengamos para mañana pasado o el otro o algo así, está muy bien. Pero bueno, ahora nos vamos mentalizando para esto de los miedos. La verdad es que ya nos han traído muchos recuerdos sobre las cosas de enfado, que a veces no tenemos que ver películas ni nada aparentemente para desencadenarlos. Pero ya tenemos ahí una película montada, quiero decir, por ejemplo, ahora con
Sí,
el tema mundial que hay, estamos viendo como una película, ¿no? Que ahora me he dado cuenta de que lo quería comentar también. No sé si tú te tienes que ir, pero
no, estoy bien, estoy bien.
claro, porque ahora mismo, o sea, claro, ¿qué pasa? Que, o sea, la realidad se vuelve una película de horror cuando, por ley, los eventos están para desencadenar miedos enormes y tristezas enormes que a un nivel de 7.000 y pico millones de personas, pues no queremos sentir. La mayoría está en la fachada todo el rato. Estamos.
Vi algo una noticia que, no sé si te referís a eso, de que en algunos lugares hay mucha molestia por acatar los controles que hay en algunos países, y en algunos países venden dispositivos para contagiarse. Venden dispositivos así como que te vas a comprar un chicle o te compraban cualquier cosa, te compraba un dispositivo para contagiarte.
Pero no entiendo. No
Es
entiendo.
como dispositivos para contagiarte, para tener corona.
¿Y para qué?
Para tener corona, para que te dé positivo, entonces como que ya cumpliste con el requisito de estar vacunado, porque hay mucha
No,
gente
pero si
que no.
les da igual, si estos están vacunando. Sí, es verdad que dicen que no, si ya lo has pasado, entonces no tienes por qué vacunarte, es verdad. Pero
Claro.
no creo que si la cosa sigue por donde va, no creo que nadie sea libre de... Porque la gente está hablando de vacunación obligatoria ya en algunos sitios.
Sí, sí, en algunos sitios. Acá en Latinoamérica también, puntualmente en Perú, escuché algo. Pero bueno,
Claro, que
sí,
no
como
sé
que
si incluirán a los que dices, pero no lo había visto eso, que se me había ocurrido como idea, claro, no sabía que ya había algunos pillos que vendían sus cosas para...
sí, te voy a compartir la información, pero que así también me quedé, parece algo de... Parece como que una historia, algo cual una fact news, pero es de un diario digital conocido, así que no. De ahí por arriba, así como el EVATES, como el dispositivo para saber si están embarazadas, una cosita así, que se trae. Entonces ahí te dice si diste positivo o no en la inoculación, que me parece una
Claro, es
cosa...
que fijaros, es como lo que nos rodea es... No tenemos que querer, y esto también es como mi asignatura pendiente quizás, y por la que nos hemos metido, o me he metido donde estoy, a lo mejor en el lío en el que estamos, o en el que estoy, y sobre todo, bueno, en España, que es así tan raro, también a lo mejor allí son más libres, pero que el lío es que tenemos un entorno y nuestra mirada normalmente muy automática es que el entorno tiene que cambiar para que yo cambie. O sea, el entorno tiene que ser humilde con sus emociones, tal como estamos viendo aquí, tiene que ser verdadero para que yo haga eso.
Sí,
Y es al revés. Claro. Lo tengo que hacer yo, lo tenemos que hacer nosotros.
claro, sí, eso es la condición del alma, eso recuerdo y la condición del alma como digamos, no es la palabra motor, o sea, pero es como que gobierna, por decir de alguna manera, claro, el principio de dominación, ahí está. Eso, y por otro lado, lo que vimos con Mary no me acuerdo el nombre del video, cuando ponen énfasis en el poder que tiene la voluntad, nuestra voluntad, para Dios. Lo fundamental, no es un poder, el reconocimiento que él tiene. Entonces, claro, no solo nuestra condición, reconozco yo, sino que además estamos llevando esto justamente a esa máxima expresión de dolor y de tristeza, como decías vos, como para sentir y estrujar. Yo recordé cuando habló de la neumonía, Jesús, en el video de Andrew,
Mm.
que él decía que tenía que ver con el deseo de no sentir la tristeza y cómo, bueno, obviamente estamos llevando a esa expresión porque, bueno, fue como la enfermedad en general, más allá de que sería como una cuestión, un daño de efecto colateral o un daño, no sé, como que viene, no en todos los casos, pero que, bueno, fue muy elevado el número. Y claro, pero no, ni ahí lo tomamos como...
El número de neumonías.
Ajá,
Sí, y el gesto de la ley de la atracción, o sea, el evento de ley de atracción es como que el mundo, muy frenéticamente y de una manera completamente irracional y todo eso, y, no, y de una manera parece de película de terror, de zombies, porque no lo puedes decir, es que el mundo se ha puesto a llamar a todas las enfermedades una sola en muchas ocasiones. Y hay que hacer, como mucha gente tiene que hacer un poco de esfuerzo cuando va al hospital con su piedra en el riñón de hace tanto tiempo para que no le pinchen o no le hagan no sé qué, o no le metan con los del COVID, no sé cuántos.
claro. Sí, sí, sí. Y eso es una forma de negación, digamos, completa, ya como listo. Es toda una sola cosa. ¿Entendés? Claro. Yo me acuerdo del documento creo que es este taller, el documento que en su momento me pasó Ana Cordero. De este taller, a la hoja final tenía el esquema. Dice, bueno, justamente como invita a tener un diario y un registro del proceso, dice, identifique cuál es la emoción que está sintiendo. Y yo no recuerdo, creo que a vos te pasé, Ana, también, no lo tengo ahora en la mano, pero ocupaba toda una carilla de la hoja A4. Claro que pasado por el traductor, nosotros, viste que vos decís del inglés, bueno, que tiene esa riqueza, esa posibilidad, pero para nosotros se repetían las palabras. ¿Viste qué pasa?
Claro.
Como que es lo
Sí,
mismo. Pero no,
sí.
había una secuencia de que imagino que la versión en inglés original permitía esa riqueza. Pasa con el guaraní también, mi mamá siempre me lo dice, que es muy, al pasar al castellano no, se pierde porque en sí mismo es muy rico. Y entonces, claro, veía yo y no la sabía identificar. Así que imagínate al mismo tiempo todo lo que implica su expresión en términos de enfermedad al reprimirse en el cuerpo, cuántas aristas, cuántas variables puede haber, y las metimos todo en una sola bolsa y hasta eso, ¿no? Hasta ese nivel de distorsión, ya, lo más torcido de lo torcido. Sí.
Sí. A ver si encuentro esa parte donde os decía antes.
Yo anoté el minuto 16:50 más o menos y 22:40. Acá ya empezamos con la semana del miedo porque se quemó un poco. El miedo a la oscuridad, no sé si tenían ustedes.
Un foco se quemó ahora.
Sí.
Ahora
Sí,
mismo.
yo tengo miedo a la oscuridad. Y eso que no me voy todavía Ana, a tu casa. Voy a llevar vela. Voy a llevar vela. ¿Sabes lo que va a hacer eso? ¿No?
Tengo.
Hacemos saltar el generador eléctrico. Queda toda la ciudad sin luz.
Sí, pero esos minutos que has dicho, ¿a qué son? ¿De la grabación nuestra?
De la grabación nuestra.
Claro, pero ahí no podemos fácilmente
Dios.
encontrar ahora mismo. Luego sí,
Claro,
cuando
no,
suba el vídeo.
Y
Sí,
lo que anoté que es un poco... Perdón, no.
No, sí, diga.
No, anoté porque me gustó mucho, nunca escuché cuando él dice, cuando habla con las personas, dice que vamos a tener secciones act doc. Yo me encantó y lo anoté. Me gustó mucho porque dice, yo no tengo planificado nada. O sea, vamos a vivir, está vivo, ¿viste? Que eso a mí me gusta mucho el uso. No sé, Ana, si conoces el término act doc.
Justo iba a preguntar.
Ah, sí, porque es de la investigación, ¿viste? De los facultativos. De la facultad, estudios, claro. Bueno,
sí, ad hoc.
yo, ujú,
Mira lo que pone aquí en la definición.
a ver,
Lo que pasa, bueno, vamos a ver aquí directamente. Es que la idea es como que según surgen, o sea,
Claro.
literalmente significa para esto. O sea, según surge el momento del problema concreto, ¿no? Un problema
Sí.
preciso, surge una solución específica que no es generalizable ni utilizable para otros propósitos.
Tal cual. Claro, no es un esquema, no es una estructura que vos trasladás y tu experiencia a la experiencia del otro, así, ¿entendés? Por eso no es generalizable. Y me gustó mucho eso.
Ujú.
Claro, pues tendemos a, bueno, justamente hablando de lo que Iván dijo recién, para una sola cosa, para todo eso le pusimos un solo nombre y generalizamos. Ya está. Se perdió la individuación y tu experiencia, está todo en la misma bolsa. Claro, y claro, eso él pone que él hace esas sesiones y pone esa característica como para reconocer que va a ser una cuestión particular,
Ujú.
propia y específica. Está muy bueno, me gustó mucho.
Mm.
No, no lo había nunca asociado a este tipo de acompañamiento. Está anoté como algo raro
Sí.
para mí, nuevo.
Claro, a mí también me pareció raro y dije, ¿qué será?
Ujú. Y entonces podríamos quizá meter en el mundo este de las escalas el evento de que se acaba de romper un foco en la casa de Ana Pilar diciendo, a ver, el nivel de dolor de Ana Pilar no es lo suficiente como para tratar con el miedo y entonces ha venido, no, como, o sea, el miedo sigue siendo superior al nivel de dolor y entonces tiene que venir un evento de la ley de atracción a enseñar más miedo para que la escala de miedo baje. Podría ser un poco así, para mezclarlo de las dos escalas con el tema de eso, la ley de atracción.
Eso
Claro,
mucho no lo entendí, pero
Sí, ahora le damos un par de vueltas, a ver cómo, o sea, quiero decir, la ley de atracción, bueno, di tú, que ibas a decir algo mientras yo cambio aquí los colorines.
no, iba a decir hacer lugar a la verdad, porque hay que eliminar el error para que entre la verdad. El miedo está ocupando un espacio, un lugar, y ese lugar está copando todo. Claro, así, entiendo. A menos más, ¿se entiende? Son inversamente proporcionales, Ana Pilar.
O sea,
bien.
el miedo está ahí en el alma bloqueando, estás diciendo, y como no puede haber error y verdad sobre un mismo tema en el alma al mismo tiempo, y el miedo es un error, pues la ley de atracción, o sea, por mucho que nosotros no queramos sentir el dolor, si no involucramos mucho a Dios y todas estas cosas de nuestra voluntad que está invitándonos aquí a involucrar tanto de esta manera, lo que va a hacer la ley de atracción es detonarnos estos miedos, y ahora lo está haciendo globalmente con el totalitarismo este de que te quieren pinchar y te quieren no sé cuántos, que todo el mundo tenga. Nos detonan los miedos para que esto baje y entonces nosotros afrontemos el dolor. O sea, estemos más practicando lo que ha dicho en este vídeo de quedarnos más con el dolor, humildes y preguntándonos y rezando porque no queremos sentirlo, todas estas cosas, ¿no?
Sí, sí, totalmente. Muy práctico, dijo.
O sea, que eso tiene
Sí.
que bajar. Sí, porque eso es...
Mm.
Esto es, de hecho, esto de la flecha para abajo aparece un croquis así, con la flecha para abajo, aparece en el PDF original de la transcripción.
Ok.
Y de hecho lo debe haber pintado él, pero no se ve muy bien. Y como tampoco podemos estar mirando si estamos leyendo, mirando la imagen, pues eso. O sea que así que está bien verlo.
Sí. Y es como una acción vasoconstrictora, siento yo así, ¿no? Que el miedo en ese momento se va como que va ciñendo, o sea, en ese nivel, por ejemplo, cuando es tan elevado, y lo recuerdo a mi papá, lo tengo como testimonio, digamos, de lo que puede ser. Papá, lo hablamos ya una vez, terminó entumecido directamente, petrificado, esa es la palabra,
Sí, bueno,
de miedo.
sí, la vejez es eso, ¿no? En general.
Claro.
Ya, pero
Sí.
bueno, yo lo que he dicho no es que lo haya dicho seguro del todo. O sea, es decir, me he dicho, vamos a brillar lo primero que me venga a la cabeza, que es lo primero lo que acaba de pasar con Ana, y para ver qué pasa con la ley de atracción y estas dos escalas, ¿no? Entonces, en el caso de la vejez, ¿qué sería? Que, o sea, por ley, uno atrae todas las cosas de malas corporales que involucran, se supone que de forma natural, pero no es natural para Dios. La vejez implica todo eso de forma natural, entre comillas, ¿para qué? Para que nosotros podamos ver en el espejo el miedo reflejado y podamos llorar por eso, que es otra de las prácticas que nos ha dado ahí. O sea, podemos afligirnos, que no somos lo suficientemente humildes como para decir como un niño pequeño que diría, no, ¿por qué tengo que tener esto? Pero como lo diría un niño pequeño, no aceptándolo, sino llorando, es decir, o sea, es injusto, pero no quedarse en el es injusto, porque el alma sino que es injusto porque el alma es la creación más grandiosa. Pero claro, eso un niño pequeño no se lo tiene que decir a él mismo. Pero nosotros sí, claro. Y entonces, es injusto, pero no juzgo a Dios ni a la creación, sino que lo veo como un evento de la ley de la atracción. Vale, estoy viendo delante mi miedo, la ley de la atracción me ha traído un cuerpo así, para que pueda descender el este de mi miedo. ¿Cómo se hace eso? Sintiendo el miedo, lo cual me va a permitir sentir la tristeza, entonces el miedo va a bajar y podré sentir cada vez más el dolor. Bueno, en la escala del dolor-placer, aquí estaría dolor emocional, sería tristeza. ¿Cómo lo veis? ¿Vamos bien?
Claro, sí, sí. Sí, yo, bueno, justamente, papá tenía, por ejemplo, para dar un ejemplo de correspondencia, papá tenía neuralgia del trigémino, que es uno de los dolores más considerados más fuertes en el ranking de dolores. Si bien depende de cada emoción, como dice Jesús, le tenemos miedo a la cucaracha, yo a la cucaracha, yo en vez de ver aracnofobia debería ver cucarachafobia.
Sí.
Porque sí, yo te juro, y ayer vi un sapo, mi mamá, yo nunca toqué un sapo, pero mi mamá le tiene pánico total, y acá ya me fui del tema, pero lo que quería decir es, depende de la emoción cada uno, yo digo, bueno, sí, para mí eso es terror, por decirlo, ¿no? Eso es terror. Ay, la cucaracha, por ejemplo. Pero sí, papá no sé a qué exactamente, pero por lo visto sí, tenía muchísimo el nivel de...
Sobre todo cuando vuelan.
Ujú, sí, se me subieron una vez y tenía una media de nylon. Se pegaron por mis piernas porque viste que tiene las patitas, pero tiene otros como pelitos, o sea, que le salen, y eso se enganchó. O sea, yo trataba de sacármela, pero quedó enganchada la cucaracha, así que yo gritaba.
Quedó.
Mi mamá pensó que quedé pegada con la
¿Cómo
electricidad.
nos hemos metido ahí en la historia?
Otra vez. Otra vez. Ahí vuelvo. Para no sentir, pues ya la estoy imaginando en mis piernas.
O bien para sentir la asquerosidad, a lo mejor está bien. No sé.
Terror. Sí.
Pero es raro. Sí, para sentir el terror, tú en este caso.
Ahí es para sentir el terror. Porque, ¿qué te hace la cucaracha? Encima dice que son los insectos más limpios que hay.
Qué paradoja.
Pero sí, lo que esto, sí, lo que te genera, y ¿cuál es la gimnasia ahí?
La gimnasia con la cucaracha.
La gimnasia
Y la panza y Me la pongo en la panza y trato de respirar diafragmáticamente.
Claro.
Ah, ahí, en lo de Ana voy a hacer, y le prometo a nuestro amado público que ella me va a filmar.
Claro.
Sí. Oye, pues esto de quedarse mucho rato observando todo lo que quiere hacer nuestra mente para que no estemos respirando, pero muy fuerte en la barriga, o sea, nos tumbamos, aunque solo sea para tranquilizarnos, intentando no hacerlo como meditación para salir de la emoción, sino para entrar, pero tumbarnos, aunque no sea lo del ejercicio que hizo ayer tan brusco de subir, que también subir los brazos, tumbarnos a respirar muy profundamente en la barriga, y la mente va a hacer lo imposible para, o sea, muchos pensamientos, tengo que hacer esto, tengo que hacer lo otro. Eso puede ser interesante experimentarlo con el propósito, como dijimos el otro día, ¿no? Y si además estáis ahí unos días de acompañar al otro, ¿no? A ver qué surge ahí.
Ver
Claro,
cómo
eso
se... Bueno, hoy antes de la llamada que me recosté un rato y bueno, como que respirar así nada más abdominalmente y como que solo se va dando, es como dice AJ, uno solo respirar y bueno, me acordaba de miedos, como que la mente también elaboraba miedos, me venían
Pero eso está muy
de
bien.
miedo, claro. ¿Cómo decís?
Eso está muy bien, ¿no?
no. Ah, perdón, sí, Iván habló.
Si vienen miedos, genial. O sea, lo que
Claro,
pueden venir pensamientos así como muy elaborados y entonces, como estás respirando con la barriga y te estás permitiendo un eso, pues el rezo es decir, vale, este pensamiento significa que no quiero sentir, qué miedo, o sea, porque el pensamiento es para decir, o sea, los pensamientos suelen tener detrás miedos muchas veces, decir, no, voy a hacer corriendo esto porque entonces, ¿qué pasa si no lo hago? No. Para sentir el miedo a...
claro, claro, eso yo, como que venía esto, como que uno tiene, y lo dijo ahí, uno tiene miedo a morir, a vivir, y algo así, ¿viste? Como que tuve ganas de llorar el dolor. Hay momentos que siento más dolor en el brazo, ¿no? Quebrado. Y, y eso facilita, eso facilita la sensibilización. Pero bueno, también esto, soy consciente que me quiero levantar, hacer otra cosa, como decía él, comer o no sé, te vas a hacer otra cosa para que eso pase. Quedarme en ese sentir, como que cuando me voy y vuelvo, como en esta circunstancia, me voy a prender la luz, se cortó, ya quiero salir corriendo a cambiar eso. No quedarme en ese sentir.
Sí, para
Eso.
sentir
No solo el ejercicio de la respiración abdominal. Y bueno, a mí la tranquilidad que me da el ver, escuchar esto, tu traducción, Iván, es lo que nos muestra AJ. Bueno, o sea, el premio es poder conectarte con Dios. O sea, esto tenés que sentir y además tenés toda la posibilidad de ser absolutamente sincero y franco, porque también me veo como que, bueno, estoy haciendo esto, tengo que hacer tal cosa, tengo que sentir, tengo que experimentar y me doy cuenta que muchas veces no es mi deseo, prima el miedo,
claro.
y decir, bueno, me voy a morir, como decía él, me voy a morir por sentir tanto dolor. Esas cosas, el verlo, escucharlo, como que uno dice, bueno, no importa si lo que pase, tenés la posibilidad de llegar a conectarte o a liberarte, por lo menos.
Sí, pero ¿en qué sentido? Cuando has dicho lo del premio...
De que lo que dice AJ, de que al experimentar, al permitirte sentir, uno no es que la carga se hace más pesada, sino que te permite cambiar la ley de atracción en base a la sinceridad de tu sentir, de tu experimentación. Si querés, si lo deseas, y si no, bueno, todo sigue como todo sigue, todo se sigue dando porque son leyes que se dan,
Sí.
¿no? A eso me refiero. Vos decías como
Pero es que
decía el...
has dicho la frase premio de conectar con Dios. Y no es un premio, ¿no? O sea, no sé qué sentido es es como los beneficios eternos que vimos de la relación con Dios, pero la relación con Dios es lo que dices, tú te has dado cuenta de que no estabas deseando sentir, por lo tanto no estás deseando estar en tu alma, igual que nadie, lo queremos la mayor parte del tiempo, y así más lejos estamos de la sinceridad que se requiere para que cuando pidamos amor de Dios entre y eso.
Claro.
Sí.
Ahora sí me tengo que retirar.
Sí, pues vamos a acabar de todas maneras porque aquí ya es muy tarde para meter tanto ruido. Entonces, despediros de vuestro amado público. Dejo de grabar ya.
Adiós, amado
Muchísimas
público. Gracias.
Adiós.
Gracias. Hasta luego. Pues ya hasta el siguiente. Dejo de...
Hasta la próxima.